Running fans, jumping fans, throwing fans, all around athletics fans, welcome to Talking in Ovals. I am Alex Cuesta. My partner in crime, as always, over there is Dave Hyatt. What's going on, my brother?
Talking in Ovals strikes again at the Northeast Regional Meet. CBA and Westfield, top two teams in all of the Northeast. Both coaches were former guests on this podcast.
Absolutely. And if you're
coincidence, I think not.
If you're tuning in today, Monday, November 27th of 2023 for episode number 66, before we get into fun stuff, like, share, follow, subscribe, rate 5 stars on Spotify and iTunes if you like what you hear today. Spread this word of mouth. Go look for us on social media at Talking in Ovals. And yeah, you mentioned, CBA Westfield 1-2. Obviously, what Coach McCafferty and Coach Tefelsky are doing over there, creating two of the best teams, in the nation and it's exciting. CBA is expected to do it. Westfield coming in and doing it's amazing. But at this point, there's always a lot of the parochial versus public school, right? Now we're at nationals. Now it's just Jersey pride. Let's just see those two schools from Jersey, especially our former guests, just going in there, kicking some ass, taking some names, and getting New Jersey on the map because we're Jersey boys and we always just want to see that. So before we jump into this week's show, last week we had a fantastic show. We talked to Robert Keller, the state editor of New Jersey Mile Split, another one of the unsung heroes with behind the scenes stuff that goes on to make track meets work and get you guys your timing and your results and all the things. So great show. Robert's a great guy, has, a good story as a runner, undersells himself as a runner, which a lot of runners love to do, especially the talented ones. And, just awesome. Go back and listen to that. But this week, Dave, I think we say, and we have a great, really cool thing that we say all the time. We have bucket list people that are coming on. Now, the cool part about running is there's a boatload of people on the bucket list, right? And we've been super fortunate, and I got to give a shout out. We do it all the time. Jeff Benjamin. Without this gentleman, I really doubt that we would have been able to get our guest today. Our guest is someone who is an absolute legend, has one of the, I feel like, most circulated Facebook videos of all time about inspiration, motivation, and never quitting. He is Dave Wottle. He is the 1972 Olympic gold medalist in the 800 meter with one of the most memorable and epic races and comebacks of all time. What's going on, Dave?
Hey, Alex, Dave, good to be with you.
Yeah, we're just as excited. So I want to jump right into it with you. With all of our running guests, especially, we want to find out a little bit about you and your running journey. So first and foremost, when did you get the spark? When did you all of a sudden realize, like, hey, running is my thing? When was that time?
I got a spark pretty early on, ninth grade. Back when I was growing up, the runners started pretty much in the ninth grade. They didn't get going too much earlier. We never had cross country in high school, so it was really just track. And I found out very early in my athletic career that I could do fairly well in running. I was trying all the sports. I was trying football, basketball, baseball. Wasn't really hitting my stride at any of those sports. And there was a track sign up, and I thought, hey, I might as well give track a try. And went out, signed up to be a sprinter. Thought I'd beaten a kid in my neighborhood called Bunny, and I thought he was pretty fast, and it really wasn't. And I found out very quickly I wasn't very fast. And I can remember my coach, Everett Daniels at Lincoln High School, put his arm around me. He said, Dave, I'm going to send you where I send everybody else with no talent to the distance runners. And that's really how I got pushed over into distance running. But I found out very early on, I think in about the second or third workout we did, they did a time trial. And I beat the kid that was the best runner, 800 runner at the high school. So, like a lot of 14-year-olds, you're trying to find something you could be good at. And I found out fairly early that I could do fairly well in running.
That's interesting. Did you ever kick yourself for realizing you were great at the half mile, one of the hardest races on the track and one of the most grueling races?
Well, it's a great story because I tell people I was a half miler in my career, in my opinion, for about 2 months. From the AAU in 1972, which was a couple weeks before the Olympic trials, to the Olympic Games, I was considered an 800-meter man. Outside of that, on both sides, I always considered myself to be a miler. All through high school, I ran the half mile only to get points for the team. I was a miler. I ran all the state meets in the mile, and never ran any championship meets in the half mile, only in high school.
So when you were in high school, were the tracks predominantly rubber, or were they still cinder mostly?
Well, Dave, they were asphalt. And I ran at Don Scott Field in Canton, Ohio. It was an asphalt track, and that's what I trained on. And a lot of the meets, though, were cinder. So it was either cinder, and then we had one of the few asphalt tracks that I got to run on all the time. So it was tough going.
Can you wear spikes on an asphalt track?
Yeah, was cinder a gift when you got to run on it?
What's that?
Go ahead, Dave.
Can you wear spikes on an asphalt track?
You had to wear flats. You had to wear flats on it.
Right.
And you know, you didn't have great flats back there. I wore Converse All-Stars. That's the only kind of shoes we had. And, you know, that's all I could afford. And, you know, they actually did an article my senior year. We had a sprinter who was a 9.65 100-meter man, John Cosmides, which back then, that was smoking for 100 yards, 9.65 in high school. Coach bought him a pair of Adidas kangaroo skin spikes. And when John graduated, the big gift to me was he gave me John's spikes to wear. So I finally had a halfway decent pair of spikes to wear on the cinder tracks. But back then, you just didn't have shoes. Even in college, I was wearing the Adidas Gazelles. That was kind of the best. It had no padding in it, had no heel flare. We just didn't have really great equipment back then, I didn't think.
So everyone out there who is listening, you can win an Olympic gold medal training in your Converse Chuck Taylors.
And run really fast while doing it too.
Remember those.
So Dave, I'm curious because we're gonna jump a little bit, but a lot of the experience that I've ever heard with the AAU comes from watching like Without Limits about Prefontaine.
Yeah,
it getting super demonized, right? Or watching like Fire on the Track. Like every time we've heard about the AAU with track and field, it's always been such a negative connotation. What was your experience dealing with the AAU in terms of competing and, you know, getting into the Olympics? Like, how was your experience with that?
I didn't have a lot of relationship with AAU. I only ran in 2 AAU championships, 72 and 73. And before that time, my coach in college really wanted me to be running in college meets rather than going to the AAU. My most fun experience with the AAU is 1973. I went overseas with Steve Prefontaine for about a month and a half. We went over to mainly to Scandinavia, and with another guy named Ralph Mann, who was silver medalist in the intermediate hurdles. So Steve, Ralph, and I went over there. Steve and I would always run against the local distance runners, and Ralph would take all the sprinters, hurdlers. But anyways, we went over there, and we were supposed to be in a meet in Italy for the AAU. And of course, Steve was always the renegade, and I was just kind of tracking along beside him. But they got in touch with him, and they were basically saying, you know, you get your butt down here. You guys are supposed to be down here competing at this AAU meet, you know, and they're talking about all the things they would do to us if we didn't get down there. And I remember we jumped on a plane and we flew down to Milan and took a cab from the airport, got there just in time to run the meet. But I remember walking in, and I just felt so proud to be kind of in defiance of the AAU with Prefontaine, you know. And I was a small character. Steve was the one that always was outspoken about that. But, you know, it was kind of an eye-opener for me and about the power they had, that they could make you come down and run in these meets or you know, make it so you have a hard time competing.
So I want to backtrack a little bit, and I want you to go over what were your fondest memories, starting back from when you started 9th grade in high school, bring us through college at Bowling Green, and then through some of your pro career. What were your fondest memories as a runner, be it winning a race, running a relay, or just some random stories that you remember?
Yeah, I think in my high school, I was a slow producer. And, I was a 452 miler my freshman year, got down to 438, 422 finally my junior year. So it was a slow, gradual move in the mile. And so my fondest memories really were my senior year. I won the state meet in the mile in Ohio. I got fourth place in my junior year. So I was happy with that. Wanted to win the state meet my senior year. So my memory in high school, my fondest was winning the state meet. In college, 1970, first time I broke the 4-minute mile, University of Indiana. It was a Central Collegiate Conference meet. I ran a 3:59 flat. For any miler, I think they'll tell you, the first time you break that 4-minute mile, I felt I was on cloud 9 for 2 weeks after that. Kept saying to myself, I can't believe you're a sub 4-minute miler. Yeah. And so, I put it up there with the Olympics, with other things that I've done as one of my fondest memories of running. And then the other two, of course, I can't get away from the Olympic 800 meters. Obviously, is one of my biggest thrills. But tying the world record in the Olympic trials back in '72, unbeknownst to me that I improved my time 3 seconds in that one race. I had no idea what the world record was when I ran it. I'm sure it registered with me, but it was so far out of my scope that I never thought I would have run that fast. So those four things, state mile meet, sub 4. Olympic trials and the Olympics, probably the ones that, and I'll add a fifth. I had probably the most fun I had was running against Prefontaine at Hayward Stadium in the mile. And
I definitely want to get into that later because
it was an epic for me. It was an epic race, and the way it came about was really kind of interesting.
So I have a question. So in high school, you win your state meet mile. Was it always going to be that you went to go to Bowling Green, or were there other offers? Or because you don't really think of Bowling Green as this big running school now. Maybe then it was, but like
it wasn't. It wasn't. No, it was not. I got a letter after the state meet from Jumbo Elliott at Villanova that he was interested. Well, in Ohio, you had various Class A, double A, triple A. I was in triple A, and they had an all state meet about 2 weeks after the state meet, where all the divisions would come together and find out who's the best. Well, I was out of shape 2 weeks after the state meet, and I got, I think, 6th place in the meet. Jumbo Elliott wrote me and said he was no longer really interested in me. I wish I would have saved that letter for years later. But, what was the question? I forgot it. I'm sorry.
Were there any other offers, or was Bowling Green kind of?
Yeah, Dave. I was signed, sealed, and delivered to go to Mount Union in Ohio. Coach Wusky was there. He had given me a full tuition scholarship. I had a roommate. I had course schedules. I had gone to my room, picked out my furniture, the stuff that I wanted, and I was all ready to go. And 2 weeks before I went to Bowling Green, they invited me up one last time, and Sid Sink was there. Sid was a 9-time All-American at BG. He was the American record holder in the steeplechase. And, Sid was the leader of that Bowling Green team, even while I was there. He was the person that I followed while I was there. And Sid was just a tremendous leader, a tremendous athlete. And he set me on fire about the potential for Bowling Green. And we really sucked in cross country back then. I mean, we got dead last in the conference the year before. We had 2 good runners. We had a guy named Paul Toggington and Sid Sink. And after that, we had nothing. Our 5th man in the conference meet was a high hurdler, Rick Zalaka. And so we really were bad. But Sid said, if we can get you to come in, one other person with you, and 2 more the next year, I think we can go all the way to nationals. And, we weren't even in the conference doing well. But he got me excited about it. I ended up going to Bowling Green, changing my mind 2 weeks before school began.
Wow.
And within a year, we had placed 9th at nationals. And the next 3 years after that, we were 9th, 8th, 7th, and 6th. 4 years going. And the only other team up there was Oregon back then. So he was able to do it.
Yeah. Sounds like Sid was definitely onto something there.
He was, I can't tell you. And you ask anybody at Bowling Green back in that era, and Sid is the person they remember the most. And he was, undisputed leader of the team.
So you talk about breaking 4 minutes, and obviously, Dave and I both ran, and I got nowhere near that. We neither of us did. We were, 4:30 guys in that area.
Yep. Good.
Have you, with what's been going on with the current track and how it just seems like everybody goes to BU and gets a sub-4 race, right?
Yeah.
I feel like it's been kind of watered down, or is it still like such an elite club that, you find, like, what's your feeling on the sub-4 mile right now?
Well, yeah, I think it meant a lot more, back when I was running. There's just no doubt about it. I mean, I was watching the indoor meet last year, with Cole Hawker and those guys. They're running a practice meet indoors, and they all four of them ran 350 or 351 in the mile. And I'm sitting there going, back when I was running, that would have been world news. Some people would have done that and even got close to 350. So, good for the runners, and I'm glad to see it. I love the Prefontaine Invitational with Jared de Goose, and, how close he was, and that race finally made me say, I was a 353 miler. I was going, those guys are running 10 seconds faster than me. They would beat me by 80, 90 yards, and it finally is getting to the point where I can't imagine myself running with these guys anymore. Whereas up until a few years ago, you'd feel like you still could compete with them.
But I also feel like, like they have a lot of technological advantages that you guys didn't have, whether it be track surfaces, shoes, training knowledge. So definitely don't sell yourself short. I think that you would have been right up there with them if you were born in this era. Well,
I think that, and Dave, I think that the difference is I have a hard time believing that mile. The half mile, I don't, for some reason.
Yeah.
You don't see the same movement in the 800 meters that you do in that mile and the 1500 meters, at least in my opinion.
Oh yeah, you're right.
And I find it interesting you talk about how Sid was the guy being a 9-time you were an 8-time All-American, 8-time national champion yourself. So it's like interesting that and Dave, we find this all the time. Hyatt, we find this all the time. All of our great runners that we have on, you guys always you're so humble. And it's such a bizarre thing to have people, like yourself. And we've talked to Johnny Gray and we've talked to, some other incredible runners. And it's like, all of you guys are just kind of like, yeah, I was okay. And it's like, you were okay. What are you talking about? I don't, and I guess maybe when you're in your world, in your realm, it's like, I mean, I didn't walk away with the world record. So I guess I wasn't I feel like when you're at that level, there's only there's so many levels of success that you guys can get to. So I find it incredible. Do you find yourself sometimes in mid conversation talking about this, being your humble self and then waiting a minute and being like, I was pretty damn good, wasn't I? Do you find yourself at that moment?
I really don't, really, Alex, it's interesting. I got my workouts and I got my results and stuff. I've kept my notebooks ever since my first meet in high school. I really don't look at myself as being all, I look at people when I saw Jim Ryan running in the mid 60s and all that, he was just absolutely destroying these great fields, winning by 80 and 90 yards. Yeah. And, when you look at stuff like that, you're going, that's what a legend is. That's really a great, great runner. And, I'm winning by 300ths of a second, barely outlating people.
Hey, you are still the last American to win a gold medal for the 800 meters, 1972.
Well, I was very fortunate. I was blessed. The race went really well. If it would have gone in a lot of different ways, if they would have gone out quick from the beginning, I don't think it would have been.
So speaking of that race, I kind of want to get into that because you said you were mainly a 1,500 meter mile runner. What made you go, for the change to go for the trials in the 800? And then, like you said, dropping 3 seconds at the trials. How much confidence did that give you going into the Munich Games?
Yeah, that's a great question, David. It's really, I think it's a neat story. I was So my goal, if you look at my training log, my goal was to win the Olympic 1500 meter. That was my goal going in to that junior year. My coach, and that was his goal too for me. That's where he thought I was the best. And he said, though, 2 weeks before they had the AAU meet up in Seattle, and he said, well, Dave, I hadn't qualified for the 800 meter yet. And you needed a 147.3, I think. I had run like a 147.8 or something. So I hadn't qualified. He says, hey, I'm going to send you up by yourself to Seattle, enter you into the 800 meters, see how you can do. And if you qualify, then I think what we'll do is we'll have you run both the 800 and 1500 in the Olympic trials, because, the 800's first. We'll put you in there. You may or may not make it. I don't, who knows if you will, but if you don't make it, we'll just do a speed workout that day, because you'd be doing a speed workout anyway 3, 4, 5 days before the 1500 meters. So you won't lose anything. So that's really how I got in the 800 meters. And in that race, it all came about because Jim Ryan, who was in there, absolutely busted the third 200 meters. I mean, I haven't really ever seen the video of the race, but what my notes say and what my mind says was he took off with a quarter to go, and he ran an extremely fast 200 meters. I didn't know any different, and I just stuck with it. And I says, hey, he's going. My best shot of making the team is just to stay with him. And so that enabled that time to be so fast. And then, unfortunately, Jim ran out of speed coming down the final stretch, and I still had a kick left coming down the home stretch. So that's what caused that time to be as fast as it was really him hitting that third 200 meters, which, as you all know, that's the slowest 200 meters usually. It was one of the faster 200 meters in that race.
And I mean, and it looks like you were able to tap into something in the Olympics, because your big move, obviously you fell behind early. You kind of got contact when you were at 400, and that third 200 is where you really made your move in the field and set yourself up for that final 200 meter kick. So did that race with Jim Ryan kind of give you the confidence to know, like, hey, I have something in the tank. Once it's 400 meters to go, I'm good. I can run an open 4 basically and be strong. Did that give you the confidence in that race, looking at everyone and going, I could still win this?
Yeah, it's two answers. One is I went into the Olympic race after the trials thinking that I could win a gold medal in 800 meters. I had the fastest time in the world. I felt, like a lot of runners will tell you when they run their fastest time, it's the easiest thing they ran. I felt like I ran it so easily that I still had stuff in the tank when I finished that race. So I went in with this super high confidence in the 800 meters. And then in the 1500 meters at the trials, Jim Ryan beat me. So I was second, and so I started saying, hey, I should really focus on the 800. But when I showed up at training camp, there's a whole drama about all this, but I ended up getting married right after the Olympic trials. Bowerman, the head coach, was very much against me getting married. I went to the first workout up at Bowdoin College, and I wanted to do a fairly good workout to show Bill Bowerman that just because I got married, it's not going to affect me. I didn't warm up properly and ran a hard workout and developed tendonitis in my left knee. So my mileage was cut from 70 to 80 miles a week that I was supposed to be running down to about 20 to 25 miles a week before the Olympics. So I went into that Olympic, even though I was highly confident coming out of the Olympic trials. After I got injured and I wasn't really able to train for, 4 or 5 weeks before the Olympics, my confidence was pretty much shaken going into that Olympic race. I still walked onto the track thinking I could win. I mean, you almost have to go in there thinking you're going to win. But then when the gun went off and those guys took off so quick, it just shattered my confidence because I wasn't able to keep up with them.
Crazy.
Now, do you feel, looking back, that maybe cutting that mileage and being more rested might have been to your advantage, or do you still feel that you?
Yeah, I don't think it was, Dave. I think it was definitely to my disadvantage. I was always, because I always trained to be a miler. So my mileage was anywhere from 70 to 120 miles a week, 120 in cross country. We ran more, 90 to 120 in cross country. So I was always used to a pretty good amount of mileage even as a half miler. And I felt that was my strength, that I had a strength that I could run 3 races in a row. Remember back then, the 1500 and 800, it was 3 races right in a row. You didn't get a day of rest. It was boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
And you had to have a certain amount of strength to be able to get through those early rounds and then be ready for the finals. So I would have rather have stayed in shape and going in with the kind of conditioning I had in the Olympic trials.
So when that race goes out fast through 400 and you're sitting there, for anybody who hasn't seen it, dead last, pretty much. How were you feeling with 400 meters to go? Like, did you still have the inner confidence, or was there a lot of self-doubt that was really starting to creep in?
Well, all my self-doubt was the first 200 meters. And luckily, they slowed the pace in the second 200 meters, and they kind of came back to me. And I was able to kind of re-catch up and re-catch the pack. I was able to regain contact with the pack after the 400. So the first 200 meters, I'm really depressed, thinking that I was just totally out of the race. I wouldn't even be able to get back in. When they slowed the pace after that first 200, and I was able to maintain the pace I had in the first 200, but I was able to catch back up with that, just maintaining the same pace. I had a very even pace. They went out fast, slow. I went out kind of medium, got back up. But to answer your question, at the end of the first 400, and really probably maybe another 50, 60 yards into that turn, that's when I started feeling I could do it. I was in the race. I was feeling okay at that point. I was at the back of the pack, but I was in 6th, 7th place. Right, and Arjunov was just right there with me. And then as soon as I was feeling fairly comfortable, Arjunov took off with about 300 to go. And I just made this semi-move to the outside just to stay out of trouble, get out in the outside lane. And but I was feeling that was when the competitive spirit kicked in. I was really ready to pounce coming into that final 200 meters.
And the thing is, like anyone that's ever run, especially the 800, it is a ridiculously fast race, and especially at that level, in reality, maybe you get one minor mistake that you can make up for in the 8. You can't do more than that. And anyone that watches, honestly, go search Dave Wottle, and it'll show up Olympic 800. Like, you don't have to go much more than that. And you'll see that it looks like Dave's running a different race when they first go off. It's bizarre. And it looks like that he's running the 15, like he didn't realize. Yeah. And then, if anyone, a lot of runners do listen to this. So it's like the mental wherewithal to just see the pack running away from you. It takes a lot of fortitude to be able to sit there and remain mentally locked in and not fully give up, because it is really mental to, stay in a race like that. It's really hard to do. So just the inspiration of your race is ridiculous, and it makes it all the better that it's an American that did it, and we get to enjoy that with a fellow American. So I have to ask the question. You probably answered it a million times. The white golf cap. Yeah. It's legendary. Yeah. Why the choice of the white golf cap?
Well, I was, it'll make me sound like I was injury prone. I kind of was. I was injured all in 1971. So halfway through my cross country season in 1970, I got a stress fracture in my left fibula, which knocked me out the rest of cross country. Knocked me out for about 6 weeks. I came back in the indoor season, trained of 71, trained for a couple weeks, and developed bursitis in my right knee. I was out for 5 or 6 weeks, came back in outdoor season, trained a couple weeks, and got another mirror image stress fracture in my right fibula. Wow. So it was just stress fracture, bursitis, stress fracture. And I started training in the summer of 71 again. And I was officiating, I was on an athletic scholarship, so I had to work all the track meets. They gave all the officials these white golf caps. And so I picked up a white golf cap, started training in Ohio in July, August, hot and humid. Started wearing this thing, kept the hair out of my eyes, sun visor, sweatband, what people wear hats for now. That's how I started wearing it. And the interesting thing, Alex, is I wore that training in the summer. But in the fall, we wore stocking hats at Bowling Green because it was cold up there in cross country. Indoor, I didn't wear any hat because there's no sun out. Why would I wear it indoors? We didn't have an indoor facility at PG. And then I started wearing it again in the spring of 72. And then after the Olympics, no one knew who I was without it. So I kept wearing the thing afterwards.
It's such a
hat is in the Hall of Fame, right?
Yeah, hat's in the Hall of Fame.
As it should.
I got a great story to tell you. I tell people, when I showed up at the Olympics, I was getting my wife settled in a suburb outside of Munich. So I was the last one getting into the Olympic Village where they're handing out uniforms. I went there to get my uniform, and all I had was a pair of triple X shot putter shorts. It must have been, this wide, and I could put both legs in one. And I says, I can't. Obviously, I can't wear that. And they go, well, that's all we got. Good luck. And which you think just is unusual for an Olympic team, but my roommate was Frank Shorter, ran for the Florida Track Club. Yep. Their colored shorts were light blue, kind of looked a little bit like the Olympic shorts. And Frank said, hey, here, you can use my shorts. And if you win, you can have them. I'll get them back here in a couple of days, because there's no way you're going to win. But anyway, so I tell people that my hat and Frank Shorter's shorts beat both of us into the Track and Field Hall of Fame because they put my hat in 3 years before they put me in, and then they put his shorts in with it. So they're both in there.
Now, we'd be remiss not to mention that you are also a Track and Field Hall of Famer in 1982, right? If I'm correct, you were inducted.
Yeah.
So obviously well deserved. So you talked about, Prefontaine, Jim Ryan, Frank Shorter. What was it like competing and running and racing against a lot of these athletes and really being a part of probably the golden era of American running at the time? What was that like? And, and we talked to some people, we've talked to some, great runners. We talked to Julie Colley and things like that. And we kind of talk about kind of the out-of-body experience. Were you at times looking at it going, what am I doing here? And then getting going and racing. It's like, oh, that's why I'm here. I race with that. I compete with these guys. So what was that like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think I ever did. I looked up to Jim Ryan tremendously. When I was a senior in high school in '68, he was in the Olympic Games. He had a world record, and you'd read about him all the time. We had a great miler in Ohio back then, Sam Baer, too, that was in a lot of meets and sub 4 minute mile. But, when I finally got the chance to run against him, it wasn't like this halo. I tried to get myself psyched up to the point where I always felt I could beat. I wanted to win when I got on the track, truthfully, no matter who was on there. And my breakthrough race probably was in the NCAA 1970. I got second to Marty LaCouri. Marty was the number one ranked miler in the world in 71.
Yeah, Marty was
good. So that
New
was
Jersey legend, Marty LaCouri.
What's that?
It's a New Jersey legend.
Absolutely. And a great, fantastic, great miler. Ryan and LaCouri. I mean, one of the hardest points I had in my athletic career is I had just gotten second to LaCouri in the NCAA meet in 70. In 71 was the huge Dream Mile at the Penn Relays. Him and Ryan. He ran a 3:54. I mean, it was on the Wide World of Sports. And, man, that was the one race of any race I would have loved to have been in. I don't know what I would have done in it, but, it was just such a big occasion. Everybody was gathered around the TV back there to watch the Dream Mile.
Oh, yeah.
Ryan LaCouri, great fight. LaCouri, masterful race.
Yeah, 100%. It was just an incredible. And, at the time, I wish that there was a lot more excitement about track. I feel like at that time where people were watching it, there were Jim Ryan, there was yourself, there was LaCouri, there was Steve Prefontaine, there was Frank Shorter. There were people knew who they were. It wasn't just something where if it was so niche, that was a thing. ESPN or whatever, that wasn't ESPN then, but your NBCs, your CBSs, they would put these races on front and center. Yeah. So during that time, who was your favorite person to compete against when you got on the track? Did you have a favorite athlete that, when you knew they were going to push you, you were going to push them? It was going to be a great race every time?
Well, the one, we had a lot of great runners back then, and I enjoyed it. I don't know if I enjoyed running against Ryan because he would beat me, and Ryan had I always thought I had a great kick. Ryan had a great kick. And, you didn't want to be with him at the end. That 800 meter was kind of a little bit of a fluke, being able to beat him in a kick. But I really enjoyed, I enjoyed running against Prefontaine, and especially in that race at Hayward, just because you can't think of a better, more exciting race than Prefontaine at Hayward Stadium.
Yeah, talk about that race at Hayward. Talk about the experience. Take us through that race because it's a legendary race. Yeah, absolutely legendary race.
Well, before the race, I think there's a great story. We were slated. Steve had contacted me about going overseas, and he says, Ralph Mann and myself, we're going to go over there to Scandinavia. Would love you to come with you. I said, yeah, I'll do it. So I'm at the AAU meet down in Bakersfield, and Steve, I did the 800. Steve did the 5,000. After the race, he came up to me. He says, hey, Dave, he says, we're getting ready to go overseas in 2 weeks. In 10 days, though, they're having a race at Hayward Stadium. It's called the Restoration Meet. They're trying to raise $20,000 to renovate Hayward, the stadium. He said, why don't you come on up to Eugene? He says, I'll run the mile against you. I'll bring you through in 2:56 for the 3/4, and then we'll race against each other and go out for the world record in the mile. So, what am I going to say? It's like I'm not doing anything else. It's like, absolutely, I'll be there. And, the funny thing about the race, that we had a rabbit in there, I think, that took off the first lap, but Steve took over. Steve came through in 2:56. I mean, he just hit it like he was on a training run. And we just raced the last mile. And, a lot of people don't realize I ran a 3:53.3. Steve ran a 3:54.6 and became the 9th fastest miler of all time.
You were
people don't look at Steve as a great miler. He was a great miler.
That's where he wanted to be.
John Hartman ran 3:54.7 and broke the Irish record in that race. All 12 runners finished under 400. It was only the second time in track where all the finishers were under a 4-minute mile. I think the other one was in 1964. So anyways, it was a great race, and of course at Hayward Stadium. Mm-hmm. And guys, I learned something in that race too. I was always, I was always so intense. When I'd get psyched up, I wasn't really trying to make friends out there on the track. I really just wanted to kind of be angry at them and beat them. And I can remember running that race and finishing it. And I was taking a victory lap you're allowed to take at Hayward. And I remember Steve coming up beside me and holding my arm up. And my initial reaction was selfish. It was like, what are you holding my arm up for? What he was saying was that race would not have been possible without me. I was the reason you were able to run that fast. We ran it together. And it was also a little bit of his recognition that he was saying I was an okay guy to run there beside me. And it always has stuck with me as a great moment between me and Pre. I'm a little ashamed that I had that initial reaction that was like, what's going on? But he was absolutely right. Wouldn't have run the race that I did without him in that race.
So I have 2 questions. First, is it true that after that race, a fan attempted to try to steal your hat and you chased him down?
Absolutely. Yeah. I finished the race. I was getting ready to do my rundown. I was in oxygen debt. And a guy came by and he's shaking my hand, and all of a sudden he grabbed my hat and he takes off running, and I'm running after him. I'm probably running at 5-minute pace. I mean, I'm tired at the end of the race. Luckily, he ran into a field right there on the north side of Hayward Stadium that was all fenced off except for a gate to get into. So he ran in there. There was no way to get out. And plus some other people had seen me running after him and were chasing him too. So we were all trying to run him down. And he finally got to the other end of the field, saw there was no way out, and stopped. And I kind of went up and just kind of grabbed my hat from him. But that was the end of it. So.
And also, you mentioned Steve Prefontaine. How did you feel that the movies of him portrayed him? Was that accurate, or was he really different? And because it kind of shows him as this very outspoken, very I don't want to say cocky, but like, or
definitely
maybe
a little cocky,
arrogant, but this person who just, had this and did he do as much for the amateur running as they made it seem? I mean, you lived through it, so I'm just curious if how you felt he was portrayed in those two movies, and was that really who he was?
Yeah, I like the one with Donald Sutherland the best. I thought that was the better of the two. But yeah, I think it really did. I wasn't best friends with Steve. I mean, we knew each other. I think we liked each other, certainly appreciated each other. We had a good time over there together, but it was like salt and pepper. I mean, Steve is out there and he is outspoken, and he was the life of the party. He liked to drink. I mean, he had a great time with the New Zealand runners. They'd always go out to the pub, get a pint afterwards. And I didn't drink. I didn't drink beer, and I didn't smoke. And so I was married. So we were two different personalities. But he was a really, I think he was just a great guy. I really liked to be with Steve, and I like training with Steve. And talk about a hard worker. My memory of Steve too was before the '72 Olympic Games. I can remember I was in Oslo Stadium. I was injured at the time. I was up there in the stands watching the workout, and Steve came out and did his warm up, and Bowerman was in the middle of the track at Oslo, and Bowerman goes, take off, and he takes off. He ran a 4-minute mile. He just paced himself. He went like 2 minutes, 2:01, 3:01, 4 minutes. And then he did a workout. So he paced himself to a 4-minute mile and then did a ladder workout. He was really ready. And what always stuck with me, he was such a hard worker. And he did it himself. He paced himself to a 4-minute mile. Back then was a chore.
Yeah,
and
incredible.
And he was always that way. And, he always would say, anybody's going to beat me, I'm going to make him hurt. And I think his biggest frustration was he always had to run me a mile. And I always felt bad because, he'd come down. He was nice enough to come down from 5,000. I never wanted to go up and have him kick my butt. But he just wasn't ever able to kind of quite do it in the mile.
Yeah. Yeah, that had to be a weird time when he passed, like everyone just kind of had to have this like weird.
Yeah, I was with him 2 weeks before I saw him. I was out there for a pro track meet at Eugene, and we got to see each other again, just basically to say hi and see how things were going. I was in Atlanta. I was out for a morning run on a Sunday morning, and I came back in the room, and my wife told me that that he had passed away. That was when I first heard, and it was one of those shocks. It was just hard to believe. He was so full of life. You had a hard time believing that he was no longer with us.
Yeah, that's crazy. And it's fun. And the thing is, like, his legacy still, like, it's wild. His legacy still lives on, right? And, it's like,
absolutely.
Most of your
more so than it was. Alex, your other question was, I didn't look at Steve like people look at Steve now, though, because Steve was, in my opinion, he was one of many really good runners that we had. We had Ryan McCory, Shorter, people that were doing things at the international level. And Steve was one of those. Whereas I think a lot of the younger athletes look back now that Steve was the paramount one. Now, he was very outspoken. There's no doubt about it, and very articulate. So he had a following back then, but he was also, as far as the runners back then, he was one of many.
I mean, I think a lot of his mystique is because of the unknown. Like, we don't know what would have happened because he was still fairly young. So, we don't know. So I think that definitely draws fans and why he has, because his story is great, but there's many, many other runners or athletes out there who have had very similar stories, but because of the unknown, and he was outspoken, he had the long hair and everything. So I think that's a big reason why he's way more popular now than he ever was when he was actually.
Yeah. And he was outspoken, but he was also very, very bright. I mean, when you listen to him, a lot of us, I would get on those interviews and I sound like a country bumpkin, and he knew what he was talking about, and he'd have a point. He thought it through. I don't want to say he was an intellectual, but he was just a very, very sharp individual.
So after the Olympics.
So real quick, Dave, I just want to jump in. One more thing about the Olympics, and this doesn't have to do much with the running, but there was a scary time during that 1972 Olympics. I don't want to get into the current conflict right now, but there was the Israeli-Palestinian issue in 1972 that's called the Munich Massacre. What was that like living through that at the time, being in Munich while that's going on? And obviously at that point, I guess everyone's probably questioning, are these Olympic Games going to occur?
Right.
What was that like living through that, being there for something and being so close to that, right? Because I feel like a lot of these things go on. We're worlds away. We're here in America. We don't experience, we can empathize with whatever's going on, but we're not there. Yeah. You guys were there. What was that like going through that?
Well, it was really surreal, going through it. And it was, the first night where the Israelis or the Black September group rushed the Israeli compound and shot and eventually killed the first Israeli athlete through the door. We heard that. I was sleeping. Frank Shorter and his wife Louise were sleeping out on our deck, and kind of heard the shot. It sounded like a car backup. It was a pop pop. You'd think it was like a car backing up, and so we heard it, but we didn't think a whole lot about it. And he didn't. I didn't hear it. I was inside. But I went out the next morning for a morning run. I went through, it was really kind of interesting. I went out the back gate of the Olympic Village, and there was no guard there, which was very, very, very unusual. But I went out and I ran a few miles warm up, or morning run, because my knee was hurting. And I can remember coming back into the Olympic Village, and some reporters were there, and they came running up to me. It was after the 800 meters. So I had my hat on. They recognized me, and they said, "What do you think of all the Israelis that were killed?" At the time, only the one had been fatally injured. And that was the first time I heard about it. Other than that, and then everything exploded after that. We were not that far away. We were only about 100 yards away from the building. We were in the middle high-rise building, and there was another high-rise, and then there was 3-story high ones that were where the Israelis were, about 100 yards away. But it was interesting. When I say it was surreal, they had it roped off very quickly. And life in the village kind of went along, because they hadn't called off the Olympics at that time. The Israelis hadn't been massacred at that time. So, we still had to get over to the cafeteria to eat. We were still doing our training, and life was kind of going on, trading pins when this terrorist incident's happening 50 yards away. It was kind of, we were stuck between two worlds in a sense. And then I had it got to be terrifying or fearful. The night that they were going to move the terrorists from the Olympic Village to the airfield, I went out for an evening run because they had not called off the Olympics. I was still having to get ready for the 1,500 meter, which I had coming up in a couple days. Frank still had the marathon coming up. And I went out for this run. I came back. I was coming back into the Olympic Village. They had this one walkway that was only about 10 feet across, roped off, because it was one of 3 ways they were going to take the terrorists and the Israeli athletes to the airport. So they had it roped off. I couldn't get across that 10-foot section. There was a gate on the other side that I could get back into the Olympic Village. If I didn't get in there, I'd have to run another half mile around this big complex to get back in. Didn't want to do it. Ran back a few ways, ran down this embankment. There was a 6-foot fence. I jumped over this fence. I ran underneath a bridge to get back to where I needed to get in. And as I was running there, I heard the guards go, "Halt, halt." And then I heard one of them say, "Oh, it's Wottle." I had my golf cap on. And I looked back to say thanks, and they all had their machine guns pointed right at me. I mean, it was a tense situation, and I was stupid enough to think that I could just kind of, skirt the line and get through. But I always tell people that's the day my hat saved my life, probably. Who knows what would have happened.
Crazy. And
but it was very tense, very, very tense situation at that point, because no one knew what was going to happen.
It's
and then
not
they had a 1-day moratorium, and then they had the games go on.
It's not to make light of that moment, but you kind of show like the distance runners mentality, right? We can get done running like 8-9 miles, but if that end of our run is inconvenienced in any way, we get that. I don't care. I earned the right to finish my run. I'm going to figure out. And you decided to go down an embankment, probably made it significantly harder than doing that extra half mile. That is the distance runner's mentality. It's like, I want to be done. I'm going to go be done. I'm not waiting.
That's a good point, Alex. We all think alike.
We've all done it. We've absolutely all done it.
So I want to ask you,
go ahead.
So you go pro in 1973. What was that experience like? Because you retired not too long after you went pro. So was that out of frustration, or did you just find that you had other goals and other aspirations? So what went into that whole time?
Yeah, I went after the dollar, and I was trying to think if I wanted to continue to compete to go towards 76. My personality is I would have had a hard time, I think, making it to 76, especially on my own. If I had, we didn't have the support system back then to keep running that they have nowadays.
Yeah.
So, I left Bowling Green when I graduated in 73. I went over to Wadsworth, Ohio. There was no track club there. I had to train at the University of Akron. I actually had to try to find high schools that I could run on the track, but I was training on my own. I was not a runner that could do well training on my own. I had to have a team around me. I had to have a leader like Sid Sink that was pushing me. And I just kind of read the tea leaves, and I thought, unless I could get into a track club or get back into some kind of a running group that can push me, I'm not going to make it to the Olympic level. So then Pro Track came in, offered me a good chunk of money just to join them for a couple of years. I did that, but my heart wasn't in it. I missed my Bowling Green teammates. I missed having that camaraderie and the people pushing me in workouts. And so I had what I think a very lackluster pro career. And that was the problem with the pro track circuit. For the most part, there were a bunch of these great athletes with gold medals, world record holders that were beyond their prime. And we weren't running the times that the amateurs were running. Well, the pros aren't going to make it if they're not running faster than the amateurs.
Yeah.
So,
that's
kind of its own demise.
So you had to be in your mid to late 20s, right? When you...
I quit in 73. That I went overseas with Pre. That was my last running that I did. And then I went pro in 74, in January 74, February 74, and I ran in 74, 75, 2 years. So I was 25 years old, which, as you know, with the middle distance runner, that's kind of when you're reaching your peak.
Yeah.
25, 26, 27. So, but I would have had to have relocated and got in with the track club, going up to the Chicago Track Club with Wool Hutter, going out to Athletes West or something, Florida Track Club, to get around a group of runners that would pull me along. I was a follower in the races, and I was a follower as a person. Sid Sink was the leader of our team. He ran the workouts. I simply followed. I followed in all the workouts. I wasn't the type person that could push myself out in front to do the kind of work I needed to do to get to that level.
And, and that's tough.
One thing you learn, guys, I know I'm showing you my heart, but as any runner, you have to know your strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
And you have to be realistic about your strengths and weaknesses. And I was looking at my weaknesses and going, the odds are I'm not going to make it with the weaknesses that I have. So,
it's honesty, good to know that. Honesty is good. And it's always, I don't care who you are. It's tough to run on your own and really do high level workouts on your own, even without a coach. Like having a coach there helps, not having any of those. And also, I feel like for you had already won an Olympic gold medal. So it's not like you were, you're obviously still hungry to get back there and do that. But you slayed a huge dragon. That is every runner's goal. You have an Olympic gold medal. So, I mean, like, it's got to be tough to get remotivated. And it's like, but I already did that. Like, maybe I can go back and get in the 1500 because that's what I initially wanted. Yeah. But I always can fall back on the fact that I'm a gold medalist. Like, that has to be something that plays in you as you're doing these hard workouts. It's like, but I mean, I did it. Like, it's got to be in your head.
Yeah, and it really wasn't that hard for me to recalibrate, but my recalibration was an Olympic goal. I wanted to win the NCAAs. So back then it was great because you could always point to the NCAAs, which was still a great thing. And our Bowling Green team in 70, when did we get second? I guess it was 72. We got second in the NCAA indoor meet. So, but yeah, I recalibrated to where I wanted to win the mile indoors and the mile outdoors, which I did in 73. So
that's awesome. So I want to jump into today's. Oh, Dave, you have something else?
I just want to know, like looking at everything that all these athletes have now, all these training groups,
racetrack, yep.
And, like all these things, like, is there any part of you that's like, man, if I was born 50 years later or so, like I'd have all these things, and, or is it just like, hey, like, I'm happy for everyone who's running now, but they have no idea what it was like.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a great question, Dave. But I probably look at my personality. And you'd like to think, if I had all those things available to me back then, how I would do now. But, I was in the perfect environment for my personality at Bowling Green. I had a great coach in Mel Broad, Hall of Fame coach. Sid Sink was the leader of the team and 9-time All-American, American record holder. I ran behind him in most of the races, especially in cross country. And I had a great group of teammates around me and that pushed me and encouraged me. And I think, what if I had done it in another environment? And I don't think I would have done the same, had as much success in another environment. So that environment was perfect for me. And even though, they have things now with running groups and all the finances and all the things you can get nowadays, I'm just wondering how my personality would work in that environment, because the one I had, I thought was perfect for my personality.
So how do you feel about all of the advancements in obviously shoes and spikes and the track and field and, the track itself and, technology like Strava, having the watches that you can, tie, like, how do you feel about all that? Like, do you think that is something that's necessarily good for the sport, or do you think there's certain parts that are kind of holding the sport back and hampering? You guys were much more about racing. You still had dual meets in college. Like, racing was a thing for you guys. Yeah, now we talk a lot about time trials. Like, everything there's a rabbit at every single race now, and every race is a big race, and they don't really race unless it's a championship meet. So how do you feel about everything that's gone on in today's track and field world?
Yeah, that's a good point. I disagree with the way it's run now. Probably Ingebrigtsen does too. When you look at he can go after the times, he can get the times, but when you put him in that competition, I think the athletes are not getting that kind of competition to where they learn how to race, how to be in various races. And so I disagree with the rabbit and going after times all the time. I was never a time person. I just wanted to get the finish line first, and that's what was most important. And it was a weakness of mine too. I should have tried to get better times at times. But hey, I'm all for the technology and stuff. But when I look back at it, I wore cotton sweats. I had Adidas Gazelle flats, and my spikes were, not the greatest spikes in the world. But there was a toughness there, there was a toughness in workouts, that I can remember going out. Ohio's not the greatest place to have trained in the winter. We had an indoor season. We had no indoor track. So we were training for the indoor nationals outside in the snow and the ice. And it built kind of a toughness that you had. And all runners back then, we didn't have all the niceties that they have nowadays, and they could be missing out on some things and things given to them. Now, I just went out to Hayward Stadium when Dave was out. We were out there. We got the tour of the stadium. My Lord! I mean, these athletes, they got saunas, and they could get a they get a haircut. They can get all the snacks they want. Everything's given to them, you kind of want to have that toughness. So I'm not saying they're not tough, because they are. Obviously, they're not competing the way they are now at the world level of not being tough. But we were able to have a certain toughness back then.
Hyatt and I always talk about, we both remember having to go out. Neither of us had indoor tracks either at our high schools. And you went out, if it snowed, if you got shovels, you shoveled out lane 1 through 3 or 1 through 4. And when you did workouts, this is what you did.
I mean, Dave, kind of like what you were saying, like you see so many athletes now who get 10th place in the race, but they run 3:51 and they're happy. It sounds like you would not have been happy anytime you would have finished 10th place, no matter what time that you actually ran.
No, I was, I could accept defeat, but I certainly didn't. I didn't like it, and I always wanted to kind of be up there in the race.
Yeah, it seems now like every sponsor is looking for times, and place doesn't really seem to be as relevant. Like, oh, you've run this fast, so you're sponsored. Then other people who actually beat those people don't get sponsorships because they don't have the same time, but they beat them head to head in an actual race.
Yeah. I think what I missed the most, and I bet you there's probably a lot of milers back in my time, was, back then, you remember you'd go out 301, 302, and you'd kick it in. That's the way a lot of the miles would go. We didn't have the people that went out 251 and 252 for 3/4. And it would be kind of interesting, to have had more of that back then, when you would adjust your training regimen to where that pace would go out so quickly, and see how you do. I can remember I was in one of the first races that occurred when Pri and I went over there to Scandinavia. Our first meet was in Helsinki, and I ran the 800 meters the first day I was there, or 3 days after I got there. Ran against a guy named Dieter Fromm, who was in the finals of the Olympic 800 meters, and ran fairly fast with a 1:45.1. And then the next day I had to go in the mile, and or the 1,500 meters, I'm sorry, and a guy named Filbert Baye. I had never heard of Filbert Baye. And so we'd line up, and, Filbert Baye went out in 1:54 for the first half in the 1,500 meters. No one went out in 1:54 back then. That was the first time that someone just busted out like that. And I'm along with everybody else. I'm going, he's coming back. He's coming back to us. There's no way he's going to keep that up. Well, heck, he just kept going. He ran 3:34.6, and I got second at 3. I was pretty far. 3:36.2. Prefontaine got dead last in that race. He was 13th, and he still broke the equivalent of a 4-minute mile. But that was when it would change. That was when it changed. Filbert Baye was the guy that ended up getting the world record. He was the one that kind of busted it out and broke through that barrier of just sitting back all the time and kicking, whereas he kind of pushed it at the beginning.
So who were some of the athletes that maybe you didn't compete against, but were running or competing in your era that you just love to watch? Like, it could have been a different event. Like, was there anybody out there that you just like, I really want to stop and watch this person?
Oh, well, anytime. I've already talked about Ryan and LaCory. I always loved their competing against one another. Dave, that's a good question. I never was a watcher. I loved any kind of exciting race that would turn my head, but I can't really think of runners that I'd zero in on that I just absolutely would stop and watch. It's a good question. Hadn't been asked that question. Hadn't probably thought about it. Probably should do more reflecting on it. I'll tell you, the guy I loved watching recently was Donovan Brazier. I mean, in 19, when he was having his run in the 800 meters, I just thought, who could beat this guy?
Yeah,
he could go out fast. He could go out slow. I don't know what kind of strategy you'd use to beat him. And it was just a travesty that they called off the 2020 Olympics. I think he would have won the 800 meters easily in that. I wouldn't say easily, but I think he would have won.
He was rolling. Let's just hope that. I mean,
he was rolling.
He's still young enough where if everything gets healthy, he can come back. But it's definitely
nice.
A rough couple of years because he is uber talented.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
Dave, did you think you had an advantage? Because, Dave asked the question, who did you like watching? And it's easier for us. It was even easier for me when I was younger because we had access to everyone's times pretty easily, right? You can go on and we had, we go on the internet and you can find out what other people ran in other towns and be interested and know. Did you kind of have an advantage where unless somebody was running a real national caliber time, you kind of didn't know until you competed against them? Was that something that maybe helped you not kind of care what everybody else was running and not really be worried about, oh, so-and-so's on the track, I need to go watch him? Like outside of LaCory, Jim Ryan, Steve Prefontaine, Frank Shorter, like there weren't that many people that were really, drawing those crowds. So did that kind of benefit
Especially
you to
overseas.
kind of focus on yourself and focus on your racing?
Yeah, good, Dave. Well, we didn't have it as often as you have it nowadays, but we still had track and field news that ranked them. So you could go into by the time the NCAA rolled around, you had the best mile times, the best half mile times. So I knew going in Jerome Howe, Kansas State, and Bob Wheeler from Duke, and they were the guys that Reggie McAfee from North Carolina, Tony Waldrop. Those are the guys that were going to have the times that I would, and usually those were the guys you would end up racing against at the NCAA. So, but yeah, when you got to the Olympics, I had no idea going into the Olympics, what was going on, especially in the 800 meters. They did have fastest times. They'd show because they put them in their heats by time, so you could kind of see. But like Arjunov, undefeated for 3 years prior to the Olympics and championship. I found a newspaper clipping going through. I actually ran against Arjunov at the Cleveland KSC meet in 1972. No idea that I did. He was in mile. And he got like 6th place, but they were talking about, that he was so good in the 800. And I can remember seeing him, and I just forgotten about it. Sid Sink, my teammate, pointed out, we're down there in the belly of the stadium, and Sid goes, hey, that's Yevgeny Arjunov. And I'm going, who the hell's that? I don't know who that is. Not a miler, not a half miler. But anyways, you didn't really know who you were competing against at that international level. Yeah, it was a lot tougher.
So how do you feel about the current state of American middle distance and long distance? Obviously, we have Yard and Goose. We've had on Clayton Murphy. Bryce Hoppel's been doing some good things in the 800. Grant Fisher's been stellar.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how do you feel about our current state and compare it to when you were competing and your slate of guys? Do you think there's a comparison there where this group can eventually rise to the level that you guys had with your Jim Ryan Shorter? Like, because I feel like we're slowly edging into more of a golden age of American running where you guys were the golden age of American middle distance and long distance running.
Yeah, no, I feel good. I feel good about where we are. I mean, Centrowitz got the gold medal in the 1500 finally, and the Goose, of course, that's fantastic. But, you just Cole Hawker and Grant Fisher, and, we just got this list of people that are coming up in the middle distances and distances. I feel very good about it. And, I didn't, if you would ask me 10 years ago, I wouldn't have said that. Now, the 800 meters, except for Donovan Brazier, and of course, Bryce is doing a fantastic job. You don't go to multiple Olympic Games if you're not a stud athlete.
Yeah. Same with Clayton, too.
And, what's that?
Clayton Murphy, too.
And Clayton got the bronze. And, I was feeling really good going into that, with Centrowitz and Clayton. But to answer your question, I feel we're doing very well. And, back when I was running, if we saw runners from Morocco, it wouldn't have struck fear in our, we didn't have the surgence of the African athletes, and even the Scandinavian runners were not what they are in recent years. So I think the world competition has gotten so high, and now we have to have our level so high. I think we're doing a great job. I love what I'm seeing out there and giving us more, almost men's and women's. Yeah. You have someone to cheer for in the middle distances and the distances now. So,
and it's nice that it's it's not just Nike, it's not just Adidas. There's these other companies that are like On Running with State there time. Like there's these other shoe companies that are coming up and really putting a dent into running because they're focusing right on running only and part about any other sports, and athletes are able to go train with other like where like Grant Fisher left Bowerman. Is he going to On? We don't know, but it seems like that's kind of the hot place now. So, but it's just nice that these other shoe companies have evolved and they're giving more people an opportunity to train and to race.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think when I saw that the indoor meet at Oregon, what was going through my mind is we have so many good, solid sub 4 minute milers in the United States. And, back when I was running, you could name it on a couple of your hands how many would get under 4. Now everybody and his brother seems to run under 4. And of course, the rest of the world is got quite a few too. But, we're right up in there. And you never know when you're going to find that, that gold nugget, that person's just going to bust out like Donovan Brazier did, just out of almost nowhere.
Yeah, like we always say, there was one meet this past winter in Boston where 75 people broke 4 minutes in one meet.
In BU, it was insane.
75 in one, like it was like,
and you get a handful of high schoolers every single year doing it now too, which is wild.
Yeah.
I think Heat like 15, that like 2 guys broke 4.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Remember we used to brag. I remember when I was running, we had 3. Ryan, LaCory, and was it Robertson? We had 3 guys in high school that broke it. I mean, it was almost unheard of.
Even worldwide, you had Kip Kano, but like there wasn't that many people breaking 4 minutes across the whole world.
That's right. Yeah. So it is, and it's sad in a way that the 4 minute probably doesn't mean what it did back then. Like when I tell you, when I broke mine, it was so euphoric. I mean, I can't explain how I was more excited for the sub 4 than I was the Olympic gold. It was, for me, it was the pinnacle of what you could achieve in track. And of course, it was always nice because the 100 and the mile were the big meets. In the meets, those were the 2 big events, and I was in one of the big events.
Yeah.
And they probably, I'd like to ask them if they feel the same sense of pride and fulfillment when they break the 4 minute mile as I did back when I did.
Maybe the first time, but I mean, it's almost expected now. That like you're going to have 3 or 4 kids every year in high school are going to run it. It's just gotten to a level, but it's everything evolves, I guess, over time. You do hope that they have that same sense of I broke 4 minutes.
Yeah. You know what?
And you have to have that. If we're going to get people up there in the Olympics that are going to be successful, you got to get them. You got to get them at that level. They have to be coming up through that level in order to be competing on an international stage.
And Dave, I'm curious if they do feel that way, because there was obviously a difference where you did it while racing. You were competing, you were racing, and in a race, you happened to break 4 minutes. Where a lot of these college kids go into races with the explicit goal of, this is a meet that I can break 4 minutes at. And not, this is going to be a fast race. I might break 4, but my goal is to win my heat. My goal is to win my race. Yeah. And I think might be a little bit different. Like, they're happy they broke 4, but it's like, all right, on to 355, on to 350. Like,
yeah,
it's the same way as like when you were first starting out running, like 430 was the goal, then 420, then 415. Yeah. Like, I feel like now it's like possibly 350 might be the new 4 minutes. It really seems like possible. Like that seems like it could be the new 4 minutes, where breaking 350 now puts you into that exclusive class that you were once in. And I do have to say, with modern technology, Dave, we've said it with a lot of the people that we've had on that were legendary runners. There's almost no doubt in my mind. You were 353 with the technology they had. No doubt in my mind you're in the 340s. Like, so it's like, so it's got to be a translation a little bit. Like, we had to have a translation of someone like you would have been up there with your Yared Nuguse, your Cole Hockers, at least competing with these guys at a high level, if you had all this training today.
Yeah. We'll never know, huh, guys?
We can create some. Listen, let's create some simulations. Let's make some video games. Let's like take like your training and like give you the level. Like we could do like what they do that in Rocky Balboa, like the final Rocky movie where he was supposed to fight the young kid. They simulated it. Like I think we could do something like that. So the final question before we get out of here for you, Dave, and this has been so much fun just hearing you talk about all of your memories and everything. This is a blast. We ask all of our guests this. So you went through, being a great runner and being discouraged as a pro and kind of leaving the pro scene in a little bit of discouragement. So if you had a magic wand and if you could fix track and field, not only for the pros, but also to get more casual fans to come back to the sport and kind of give the pros now the support they need to make this into a living, because there's still only very few pros that actually make this into a living. And I mean, with the level that we've been running, there shouldn't be an American pro that's not a millionaire. They should all be living the life. So if you had a magic wand and you could fix the sport, what would you do to get more casual fans in here, get our pros paid, do what we need to do for them?
Oh, man, that's a tough question. I don't
love it.
I don't even know if I have an answer to it. I don't know what kind of answers you've been having. I don't know how to answer that, Alex. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's been so long since I've been in the sport, and like I said, I like what I see going on, and I like the trend line that I'm seeing. So I'm not sure. I'm sitting here going, well, I think I'd change a lot of things. Now, I would say I'd like to see the athletes running races instead of time trials all the time. I don't think that's good for the sport. A lot of people think it is, but I think why do people get excited about the Olympics? Because they know they don't care about rabbits. They're going after the people that can win gold, silver, and bronze, and that's what has always in my mind been exciting about track, not the times. And They just, obviously there's people that think the times are important. So, but I wish I could answer the question. I'd have to really reflect more on that. I apologize. I don't have an answer.
No, it's okay.
Off the top of my head.
Getting back to racing is a good answer, because I feel like what you're saying is true, because to the track nerd, yeah, we can go watch a bunch of fast times and we can appreciate, right? What someone sitting there going out there, we're watching 800 and you have 3 guys sub 143 and we're like, that's awesome, right? Some 142 guys, like, that's amazing. You tell the common man, 3 people just ran 142, and they're like, the hell does that mean? Like, what does that mean to me? But what you could say is, look at this finish. It could be a 146 finish, but look at how great this finish is. The last 50 meters, these 2 people pushing. That's exciting to everybody and anybody. So
I agree.
I think that is something that could help fix the sport. More racing, less time trialing.
Yeah, and what's probably nice about that, in high school, you're going to get the racing. I think, they're not going to be paying rabbits to come in there. Even college too. You are getting that. It's just at that top level, that international level, where they're going with the big meets and they're trying to get the fans in, trying to, push the idea that they're going after a world record to get the crowds into the stands and things. So.
Yeah, it just seems, like it's just been hard to catch on here in the States. Like you go overseas, tons of fans. Even some of the meets that aren't Olympic or U.S. trials, even out in Oregon, you're seeing like half the stadium full, and it's like we've had some people say like put it on DraftKings. Have betting on on a sport would help bring in fans. Or have some sort of league here in the States where, you sign athletes to contracts, like you have to run 5 or 6 meets here. And so we can tell the fans that you're going to be at this meet and that you're going to show up. Or we've had people say, let's have teams based upon regions of where they train and have dual meets and have them on TV, so many different ideas, but until someone with deep pockets wants to get involved and, try to challenge the USATF on stuff, it's just going to be what it is.
Yeah. I think I'd just say, just take away the rabbits. If you don't have the rabbits, you get into the competition.
I would say that as well, but one of our favorite guests, Eric Sawinski, is making his living being the greatest rabbit in the history of man. So
he's a great rabbit.
And so I don't, until Eric is done, then when Eric's done being a rabbit, I'm with you. Until then, let Eric live, man.
It's funny. I think back, I think I could say I never ran a race with a rabbit. I can't ever remember running a race with a rabbit.
Jim Ryan was the rabbit, right?
Jim Ryan or Steve Prefontaine, one of those two were the rabbits. Because they always went out.
than a rabbit. So,
oh man. But anyway, Dave, thank you so much for coming on. This was an absolute blast.
Okay, thank you, Alex and Dave. It was good to see you again.
Yeah, Dave. I mean, it was an honor meeting you in person. And I said, Alex said he's going to be a great guest. He's so humble, so many wonderful stories. We can't thank you enough for coming on, because more people need to, know that track didn't start in 2018. There's so many legends that have run before us who have helped pave the path. And it's nice hearing, how you still follow the sport, and you don't have any of this bitterness. So if I were to run now, because that's such an easy thing for some of the older runners to say, but you're involved in it now. You love watching it, and it's just great that we have ambassadors like you, who are still involved in this great sport.
Thank you. It is a great sport. No doubt about it. Changed my life.
So once again, he's Dave Wottle. He's the 1972 Olympic gold medalist for the 800 meter. Go look up Dave Wottle, Olympic 800. You'll see one of the most inspirational and greatest races you'll ever see. And, I hope we let you shine the light after you watch that race and you come back and listen some more. Or if you've, made it this far, you already did. You'll see the man behind the white hat, and you'll know he's much more than just that 800 meter runner, because he doesn't even consider himself an 800 meter runner. So how about that? So once again, if you like what you hear, like, share, follow, subscribe, rate us 5 stars, Spotify and iTunes. Spread this word of mouth. Go look for us on social media at Talking in Ovals. And don't think I forgot coaches out there. Send us your PRs. Indoor is about to get underway soon. We got nationals coming up this week, and then indoor season's right on its back. So we want some PRs. Don't care if it's your slowest runner, your worst thrower, your least high jumper. If they get a PR, we want it. So we want to make them feel special, because every PR is hard fought, and your kids, your athletes deserve to have a shout out. So once again, everybody, thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week. So long, everybody.